So good morning or afternoon. Thank you for joining us for a quick overview on dispelling the myths of moving Oracle workloads to the cloud. For the remainder of the webinar, it's really focused around drawing out the experience of what kind of challenges we find when we're engaging with customers and starting these projects off. So perhaps we can start with Jim. So Jim, thinking about the kind of projects that we see here at Clockwork, what type of workloads do you see customers moving?
Yeah, so we at Clockwork we see a range of customer needs and customer projects. Everything from very point projects, so moving single systems from maybe from on-premise into AWS, right the way through to strategic decisions for a business to get out of the data center agreements that they're in and move wholesale into AWS, and we can be at one end or the other end of that scale. The types of systems, we see lots of legacy commercial off-the-shelf systems. We see a lot of bespoke applications that use Oracle as a back end, and we've also noticed that quite a lot of SaaS organizations use Oracle as a back end as well. So we see those guys moving from on-premise to cloud so that they can scale their businesses as well. The types of migrations tend to be traditional architectures, but there's always an element of modernization as we move to cloud. It might not be a complete refactoring, but there's always some optimization to be done. So to sum it up, a lot of legacy, some bespoke and some SaaS, large projects and small, generally traditional architectures, but with a degree of modernization. Thinking about Mike, what do you see? What sort of systems do you see, and how does AWS handle those systems?
Yeah, it's interesting. We see all types of systems. You can't really categorize and say these are the types of systems that are the best fit, because we're seeing all sectors. So I'm doing work with government here in the UK, and in fact next week I'm travelling to Vegas for our big global conference, reInvent, where I'm doing a presentation with a UK government customer here on how we move their legacy systems into RDS. So lots of work in the government sector in the UK, but also a huge amount of movement in the finance sector, which is quite surprising when you consider how slow to adopt new technologies the finance sector tends to be. They tend to be a bit risk averse, but we're seeing a really big uptake in that sector. Aeronautical, I'm doing some work with the big aircraft manufacturers. Transportation is another one. There's very few sectors that really aren't looking at cloud, if I'm going to be honest. They all tend to start the same way, and that is you look at proving it's possible, proof of concept or a pilot, although I'm starting to see people preferring to do pilots rather than proof of concepts. So if you think proof of concept is where you try and work out if the cloud works. And it's interesting that most people want to do a pilot, a difference being that a pilot stays there when you finish and becomes the first tranche of work that goes live. And what that's telling me is people are no longer looking to prove whether or not the cloud works. They're looking to work out the best way to move their workloads in, which is an interesting shift that's going on in the last few months. I'll give you a couple of examples of things. Verizon, a big US customer, a huge Oracle customer. It was a proof of concept in their case. About 18 months ago, we did a proof of concept around one of their big Oracle systems, and we moved that across to RDS Postgres. At that point in time, Aurora wasn't available, so we did a proof of concept on RDS for Postgres, and we saved them in the region of 1.75 million per year just in moving that one database. And that was looking at the license costs of running the Oracle system on-premise, as opposed to the largest RDS for Postgres instance that we had at that time. It's a big system, so it ran on our biggest platform. It cost $250K to run it in our environment and $2 million to run it on-premise with the Oracle licensing and everything. So huge, big benefit for that. As a result of that, at the beginning of this year, Verizon have signed a contract with AWS. This is all in the public domain, so I'm not telling you anything that I shouldn't hear. But they've signed a big contract to move tens of thousands of their Oracle databases into the cloud. And at the moment, there's a huge project going on in America to do that. So that's not an untypical. I mean, we like to see more of those. We tend to see more of the pilot work going on in the UK at the moment, where we're looking to move a number of strategic systems in, more as a pilot piece of work, and then that will just organically grow into the rest of their systems. But by and large, we're seeing most people going all in. Jim, have you got any examples of the work that you're doing in your environment at Belron?
So you meant Ross,
sorry. Sorry, Ross.
No, that's all right. So I guess typically we've been sold on the cloud for some time. So we're predominantly an AWS house anyway. So we've done and built a number of solutions. I think typically we've gone through the process of migrating and building out solutions direct. We've got a cloud first strategy for most of our things. We're probably about 80 or 90% there. Really at this point in time, as a company, we're starting to look at how could we be more strategic within the implementations that we're doing. That said, we're also exploring I guess the new approaches with serverless, microservices, etc., that can lend a hand more where we're seeing black box services that AWS can provide through Lambda, etc., that then would help us springboard to a more service-oriented architecture with some of the solutions we're coming up with that will enable some of our brands to take more advantage on what we can do and build here at Group. So that's kind of where we're at from that point of view. But stepping back, obviously for alignment here with Clockwork and AWS and where we were at with the Oracle side of things. So I mean, our Oracle instance is by no means as complex as some of the other systems, but we were actually left into a situation whereby we had really a short amount of time to get this done in terms of a migration because our vendor at the time had unfortunately been given notice in the current hosting environment, which was actually on premise. So we kind of entered into a SaaS model with a vendor. We'd been in with that vendor for quite some time, and our strategy was to go to the cloud at some point actually this year, but the situation we put in was actually quite I guess unique at that point, and that sort of pushed us forward to that cloud. And fortunately we'd happened and connected with Clockwork down this pathway. But in terms of the movement to the cloud, what the cloud offered really in this instance, because none of us had gone through an Oracle move either on-premise to cloud, so this was something for new both for the team here. So we had platform architecture supporting Clockwork, but ultimately what we weren't aware about was what flexibility the cloud in this instance for Oracle would provide. Like I said, that not happened before. So things like we would basically discovered challenges along the way that I think if we weren't going towards the cloud, we would have been pretty much in a stuck state. So where I see the cloud helping out here for most instances in any move, whether it's Oracle or anything, is the risk mitigation and the sort of flexibility that the cloud provides. So if you're going down and discovering stuff, then there's something from a cloud perspective that you can adjust very quickly on the fly to then be able to retest or reconfigure something that will allow you then to take that step process. If you'd bought that on premise, you've done that because you've taken assumptions on something that maybe you weren't 100% clear on, or a nasty surprise comes up and suddenly you've invested actual funds to something physical that sits in an environment. That's not really where we need to be. We need the flexibility and we need risk mitigation. So a big case and example is that in this move that we did, we found that our Oracle instance was still 32-bit. We shifted that to 64-bit. That took a matter of time. From a shift of the environment, no time at all, but scripting wise, we had some work to do. Getting our legacy, sort of integrations into that again was something that presented some challenges. The flexibility that cloud offered, particularly as well with migrating data from a physical on-premise environment to the cloud, that was something that really helped us out. Now, the big thing for us, talking about the risk mitigation again, was the fact that the on-premise environment, we just did not know what state this was in terms of backups or any disaster recovery. We had sort of the verbal confirmation from the hosting provider what that was, but we just didn't know. And actually, we used the cloud as ultimately a starting point for some further backup, some risk mitigation in case the activities that the provider was doing would actually go ahead and break down the system. So there was all those different things that we could we could go into more detail on, but ultimately the cloud offered us that platform for flexibility, for risk mitigation. And as I stated at the top end there, this is something we'd already gone down the pathway with a number of other applications, and to the point now where we're starting to get onto that maturity level where the cloud can really start pushing us further forward.
That's a great overview. Thank you very much, Ross. So some of the questions that we get generally quite high level, some are quite easy. There are some complexities when you're planning the logistics of going to the cloud that needs to be taken care of. And right up front, one of the first ones that we get is around Oracle licensing. So Mike, first question, don't you need a lot more licenses to run Oracle on AWS? And don't they cost more?
Yeah, thanks for that, Fred. Love those questions because we do get them a lot, and it really is important to dispel the myths, if you like. If you think back to the example I gave previously, talking about the Verizon move into AWS, they went from a $2 million annual spend to a $250,000 annual spend. So irrespective of what I say, that's public domain data that you can look at. It's costing a quarter now what it was before, and that is what drove their whole movement. That's just an example point. The reality is, if you've got nothing today, and I mean, so you have no databases, no applications, nothing at all, and you're about to embark on a cloud journey, in that specific use case, and not discussing whether or not an Oracle solution is the right thing to do or not, let's assume that that's what you've chosen to do. Because of the changes that Oracle have made to their licensing rules, you do have to buy twice as many licenses in any vendor's cloud as opposed to Oracle's cloud for the same workload. That is a statement of fact, but it is only of interest if you don't have anything today. So let's look at a more real-world case. Let's explain how Verizon were able to save 3/4 of their cost. Most Oracle systems have been around for 5, 10, 15, 20 years or more. So these are well-established systems. And as they are well-established systems, they have licenses. Everybody is licensed to run the environments that they're running on. There's two things that really drive the cost savings when you move to cloud. The first one is Moore's Law, and I'm pretty certain that everybody in the call will be very familiar with what Moore's Law is. For those of you that don't, Moore's Law states that CPU performance will double every 18 months as a value. And that is holding true. That has held true for the last 20 or 30 years. The other thing that really impacts the cost of running workloads in the cloud is elasticity and scalability. When you deploy, especially with Oracle, when you deploy your workload on-premise, you architect and design your systems for the maximum workload it will ever run. And so that is your peak usage, and you buy licenses for that, and you can't reduce them. That is it. That's what you buy. When you're running in the cloud, you can take advantage of elasticity. If you look at Gartner and Forrester and people like that, they will state that the average workload utilization for an on-premise system is somewhere between 20 and 30%. If you couple that up with Moore's Law stating CPU performance will double every 18 months, if we take a system that's 5 years old, Moore's Law says we only need a third as many cores. You're running at 30% utilization, so you only need a third as many cores. So the reality is you need significantly less cores in the cloud to run the same workload as you architected 5 or 6 years ago on premise. So the fact that if you had nothing and you were starting from scratch, you would have to buy 2 times as many licenses is actually completely negated by the move to cloud in the first place. The other point I do want to touch on that Fred mentioned is that don't licenses cost more in the cloud? And actually, no, they don't. If you go to the Oracle price list, there is a price for the license, and that is the same price irrespective of where you run it, whether you run it in Oracle's cloud, in our cloud, or on-premise. Exactly the same license price. All that Oracle have done is they've said in on-premise or in Oracle's cloud, it's one license for every 2 cores, and in everybody else's cloud, it's one license for 2 threads, which is where the twice comes from. But the reality is, it really doesn't come into play. When you're moving older workloads, we really do see price reductions across the board. Sorry, it's you, Fred.
Thanks, Mike. So, Ross, what's your experience with licensing when you moved over?
Well, again, much like just was stated, we were able to reduce them because we obviously went to virtual CPUs within the AWS space. So pretty much, I think we dropped by about a quarter in terms of the amount of licenses. But that's because we also had I think we had a permanent HADR set up in the previous vendor. But although we've got that set up, we've accounted for those licenses. But again, the virtual CPUs were able to drop us down. So probably roughly about a quarter reduction.
So, Jim, and yourself?
Yeah, so I mean, it's something we see across the majority of customers. So, as Mike very, very nicely explained, there's a lot of uncertainty around licenses, but what we find is that customers fit into their current license estate simply because the AWS platform is a lot more powerful. We tend to suggest alternative architectures as well. So when the customer is looking at very much a like-for-like move, we might suggest alternatives that exist that might lower license compliance. And as Ross said there, not having an active DR is often a key benefit as well. And I would say, Amazon are always very helpful with alternative platforms as well. And Mike, I know there's some key programs around to encourage customers to adopt alternative platforms, aren't there?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Yeah, we have for most of the people on the call, for the audience on this call, we have a program called Database Freedom, which you may or may not have heard of. It actually comes from a load of tweets that our CEO, Andy Jassy, does. You might see the tweets from time to time where he talks about the number of databases that have moved across to open source, and he always puts the hashtag DBFreedom on the end of it. It was a colleague in Canada, stole that hashtag, and we've named a program after it, which is called DB Freedom or Database Freedom. And what this program is designed to do is it's designed to help our customers through our partners, people like Clockwork, to move their commercial databases into the cloud. So from a commercial on-premise database to a cloud-native database. And it doesn't just apply to Oracle. I know we're talking predominantly about Oracle on this call, but Database Freedom is not just about Oracle. It's about commercial databases going from on-premise and enabling them to be cloud-native applications and cloud-native databases. I don't want to turn this into a DB Freedom call, but certainly I'm more than happy to speak to any people on the call at a later date about this. There are some significant commercial incentives to help our customers do that transition, and they're designed to address the double bubble. And what I mean by that is, whenever you move a workload across a technology platform or across an environment, there is a period in time of which you are paying for both environments. It's an inescapable fact of doing a move that there comes a point where you've got to pay for both. Database Freedom's primary aim is to remove that, and there are some significant cost incentives to make it cost neutral, or indeed for most people cost beneficial to move across to the cloud. Now I'm talking about migration costs. You then get a lot more significant savings once you've actually gone to a cloud native database.
Thanks for that, Mike. Okay, so I hope that's answered any licensing questions around Oracle you might have. Of course, just remember that there is a Q&A at the end. So if you have any further, we'd be happy to cover them off for you. Moving on, we've got the next one here being support and certification, or the difference between the two. So, Mike, we hear fairly often that Oracle isn't certified on AWS. Can you help us understand that a bit better?
Yeah, certification and supported. It's another area of ambiguity, uncertainty that is perpetuated by companies that may want to persuade you not to move off their technology, shall I say. Support is the one that matters, and what support means is if you ring up Oracle and you say something has gone wrong with my system, and you've got a CSI, a support identifier, or the support certification or the support agreement determines whether or not Oracle will help you resolve the problem, and that's the one that really matters. Is your system supported? Certification has entered the phrase. What certification actually means is the vendor, and this isn't an Oracle term, by the way, if you've got something that's certified, the person that is certified, what they're saying is, I have tested my application or software against your exact configuration. So I have your exact hardware, your exact storage, your exact network, everything that makes up your system, and I have proven my software stack on your hardware stack in an exact mirror. And that is what certified actually means. So Oracle will certify their engineered systems because they own everything. But most people, in fact, I would go so far as to say everybody that's coming off of an on-premise environment, unless they happen to be using an Oracle engineered systems, but for those of you that are using IBM, that are using HP, that are using Dell, that are using EMC, and I could go on and on with different hardware vendors, none of those are actually certified. They are all supported configurations. And what Oracle do, if you go to the support page on their, in fact they call it their certification page, bizarrely, but if you go to their support portal and go to the certification page, what they will actually do is list the versions of software against which their products are supported. And then it is down to the hardware vendors to certify the software, so the operating system, against the hardware. So when Oracle say, my database or my application is supported against Red Hat version 7. That is what Oracle's support statement says. And then you as customers, or indeed the owners of the hardware that you're running your software on, it is their job to say that Red Hat 7, in this example, is supported / certified against the hardware in which you're running. And it is those two models that make up the support agreement that you have with Oracle. So that's how your on-premise environment works. When you move into AWS, we have what we call our shared responsibility model, which is almost identical to what I've just described. The subtle difference here is that we, as in Amazon, we will certify that Red Hat 7 and whatever operating system you choose to use is certified against the hardware and the hypervisor and the network and everything else upon which we are running it. And then Oracle will provide support of their software against the operating system that we make available to you. So from a support point of view, we are fully supported by Oracle. And in fact, AWS is able to sell you not just the database services, but we're in a position where we can sell you a licensed Oracle database running in our RDS for Oracle environment. And that is through the arrangement that we have with Oracle for the support. So it's really important to understand the distinction. Certification largely doesn't matter. It's the support that's critical, and all of that, well, we support all of the operating systems that Oracle supports. So as long as we architect properly, we shouldn't have any problems at all.
Thank you, Mike. So I'll fire this one to Ross as the acid test. Ross, as a customer, have you had any issues with getting support?
None at all. It's been pretty smooth.
Okay.
No challenges.
And what were you hosting on before you moved across to AWS?
So we were on premise in Unix. So physical. Well, it's a virtual environment on Unix. So that was before we moved to AWS and Linux.
So the environment that you're running on-premise, the Unix environment, I'm guessing that's not an environment that's certified by Oracle.
Well, so like I said, we picked this up earlier this year. It might not have been it's just something that we were planning to move anyway. So we hadn't double checked whether or not we were still certified with the vendor. We were just very clear that we wanted to move off into an AWS environment. So we're on a deprecated version of Oracle anyway, so we probably weren't supported from that perspective.
Yeah, you're not alone though. I shouldn't laugh, but there's so many people in that position. And actually, another big advantage of moving to the cloud is, again, we take care of all the patching for you at a time to suit you.
Correct.
I hasten to add. You don't come in one morning and discover it's been done.
Yeah.
But actually, on that theme, are you running any Oracle workloads in the cloud at the moment, Ross?
I'm not that many, I don't think.
Okay, so you're running some through what, in pilot pages or POCs or?
Well,
so the work. I was sorry. We've still got our main module set up and run, but so we are running the current version, which is a deprecated version still. But we're right in the middle of our upgrade path at the moment, directly with clckwrk. So I'm getting to the 12.2.8 version. So that's what kind of our next steps around that. But from our current version now, it is live. So the workflows are in operation, but it's not a massive setup that we have here.
Okay.
And I just follow that up with Ross. I mean, the many customers that we see are running on legacy hardware, older versions, and quite a lot of the work that we do is to analyze that, to work through what's going to be needed to migrate it to cloud. And you know, in Ross's environment, we've achieved the migration to cloud, and then there's a little bit of work to do afterwards to bring things up to date as well. But yeah, I mean, the majority of workloads that we see are on legacy kit. They aren't certified. They're very much supported, but yeah, we see a lot of legacy migrations and older versions as well.
Okay, I think collectively we don't see any pushback from Oracle on support issues.
No.
With AWS.
No.
Not a one. Okay, so moving on then. Next, the elephant in the room is normally high availability. So, Mike, again, we hear a lot of questions around Oracle RAC. What's your opinion on RAC, having come from Oracle, or 30 years of working with Oracle?
Yeah, and you're right. I do work for Oracle. It's sort of being expunged from my CV at the moment. And to be fair, I did enjoy my time at Oracle, but yeah, you got to move forward in all things. But yeah, you're certainly throwing the interesting questions to me this morning. But anyway, Oracle RAC. So for my sins, I'm one of the people who can lay claim to have used Oracle RAC when it was called OPS, Oracle Parallel Server, if there's anyone that remembers that, back in the early 90s. So I have quite a bit of history with that. I'm also told I put one of the first RAC clusters into production in the UK, but whether or not that's true remains to be seen, but that's what Oracle tell me. But if you look at the history of RAC, RAC was originally designed as a scaling solution. Oracle Parallel Server, as I worked on years ago, was a way of exceeding the capabilities of a single server to deal with load. And I was using it at a big telecoms company some years back. But it was really with the advent of commodity hardware that RAC gained its prominence, the advance of Linux operating systems and the Intel chipset. And for those of you that can remember, back at the turn of the century, when this all started to take off, the Intel chipset was a single core chipset. And that meant that your commodity server, whilst it had 2 CPUs in it, it only had 2 cores in it. And most Oracle workloads then, as in now for that matter, require significantly more than 2 cores. And in fact, based on the analysis I've been doing over the years, most databases, if you take it as an average, are running somewhere between 10 and 12 cores of database compute. So a two-core piece of hardware is clearly not going to do the job. And what Oracle RAC did was it gave you this horizontal scalability so you could spread your workload across multiple commodity hardware systems to achieve the performance that you required. And the whole premise of the solution was to remove what at the time was quite a large cost of the mid-range servers, so the big Sun boxes, the big HP boxes, the big IBM boxes, the multi-core or multi-CPU boxes. It was to replace those with commodity boxes. It was a cost play, and it was a very successful cost play, I might add, because the commodity servers were a fraction of the price of the big enterprise mid-range servers they were replacing. So that's where it started. That's what it was doing. Over time, again, you should all be fully aware of this, Intel chips have embarked on increasing the core density of their chips and are now up to, I believe, 24 cores. There's probably some bigger ones coming up at the moment. But even on a 2-core box, that means that we've now got 48 cores in a single commodity server. And in fact, some of the things that are going to be announced at the reInvent are taking us to way beyond 48 cores in a single VM. And so scale is no longer an issue. So you might say, well, why do we need rack then? Because if rack was all about scale and scale is not an issue anymore, why have rack? Which is a really good question, and one that I pose back to people in the first place. But there was actually a secondary function of rack that's now the prominent function of rack, and that is high availability. So as you move workloads across multiple physical servers, what you are doing as a consequence of that is providing high availability, i.e. if a single server fails, you are still running on surviving servers. But that was never its primary design, that's its secondary design. So if we look at today's workloads, using Oracle RAC is now primarily a high availability play. That's its only real play. And it's not the only way of delivering high availability, I might add. Long before RAC became prominent, we were using things like HACMP in the IBM space or Solaris cluster in the Spark space to provide high availability. Now, when you move into AWS, you go into your RDS for Oracle instance, and if you want high availability, there's a checkbox that you tick, and that's it. It's no more complicated than ticking a checkbox. And what that will do is it will give you high availability across availability zones. So not only are you protected in a data center, you're protected across data centers as well. So that's just, as I said, it's just a tick box. So now your question comes down to, what availability do I require? RTO and RPO, recovery time and recovery point. Recovery time being the critical one here. So whenever I get the Oracle RAC question, which I must admit I get very often, it's a very frequent question, you can't do RAC, I need RAC. I put the question back to the business. What is your business continuity plan? In the event you lose your data center, what happens? What do you need to happen if your data center fails? And for most people, and when I was head of development, this used to be my responsibility, so I can talk firsthand on this. What you do with your business continuity planning is you work out, where am I going to put my users? Because if your data center's gone and your building's gone, your users have gone also. So where am I going to put my users? What is my most critical system I've got to get back? Because that's got to come back first. And you categorize all your systems in levels of importance, and you give them recovery times, i.e. when do the users need to be able to log on to them or not? So knowing all of that, the question I always pose is, assuming you have a failure, what is the use of the only thing that is left running being your database if nothing can talk to it? Why do you need your database to be 100% available if nothing else is? So this is the question I pose. And for most people, sub 5 minute, it's probably sub minute if I'm going to be honest, high availability through our standard functions is more than adequate for what most people require. And before the days of RAC, all we had anyway. I do want to point out some other features which you may or may not be aware of. In the Aurora space, so again, if you're going to the DB Freedom programs and moving away from commercial databases, within the Aurora space, we do actually have multi-master, zero downtime, zero multi-region through our serverless offerings. So in the open space, I absolutely can mirror the functionality of RAC if you require it, but I fall back to what is the business need for that level of complexity? Because very few people actually need it.
So Mike, thanks for that. A follow-up question then. So what does best practice look like in AWS?
So we always work back from the customer. So it's one of the big mantras that we have here in AWS. Yeah, we pride ourselves on being the most customer-centric company in the world. And it is something that is instilled in all of our architects to work backwards from the customer. So my starting point is always, what levels of availability? What is your business continuity plans I've just explained? So once we've established which of the systems it is that need business continuity, need really rapid business continuity, because I suppose everything needs business continuity, it's whether it's a minute, an hour, or a day. But once you've decided whether you need it back in a day or a minute or an hour, that allows me to determine which of the automated processes I can use to deliver that. So for a production system, which is typically, I want near zero downtime, then I would go into my console and just click the multi-AZ high availability option, and everything else is taken care of for me. In my development and test environments, I can do it a different way, and I often do, and this is where a lot of our cost savings come from. I can take storage snapshots, and if I need to recover my test environment or my development environment, or indeed roll it forward or back, I can do that at the storage tier. So I'll take a storage snapshot and just restore that somewhere and start up the database again. So that's a bit longer outage. That's getting towards the 10, 15, it depends on the size of the database, but it takes a bit longer to restore one of those. But that's just storage tier. There's no compute, nothing running with that one. And then for some of the development ones, I'm probably going to be looking at something like a data refresh. So I might have a gold master somewhere that when someone needs a new development environment, or I've got to bring that back, I will look to restore the entire environment from a gold master and not actually do a recovery on it. So those are the three categories I tend to see. And the big work is sitting down with the business and identifying which is the appropriate place to put the workloads.
Sounds like a good approach. Jim, have you got any examples of where we're doing this for customers?
Yeah, I mean, as Mike was talking there, we did a migration for a large e-commerce system here in the UK earlier in 2018, and the customer was running a 3-node Oracle RAC cluster, very large workload. We did exactly what Mike said. We revisited the non-functional requirements. We established that the short outage on the database tier would be acceptable because it's a few moments in multi-AZ RDS. We migrated them to multi-AZ RDS, and actually what they found was the benefits of moving there were huge. So transactional throughput went through the roof. Customer transaction times was a lot lower. So in an e-commerce system, with Black Friday coming up, that is absolutely what they needed. They could process more transactions with a similar platform footprint, and within those transactions, those customers were experiencing quicker transactional times, quicker add to basket, quicker checkout, which is exactly what the customer wanted, and that was 3-node Oracle RAC to multi-AZ RDS in AWS.
Thanks, Jim. Ross, what's your experience with high availability?
Just in this particular for Oracle instance, we haven't had to enact it, so that's a good thing. So we've really had an upturn in performance since we moved into cloud. They're noticeable from the users. We haven't had any impact at all, so our uptime has pretty much been 100%. There's been a few blips, but mainly it's been in control. And like I said, from a disaster recovery or anything else instance point of view, we haven't had to enact it yet. We've done a few tests with it, which has worked quite nicely directly with yourselves, but other than that, it's not had to be enacted through the course of day-to-day operations. So pretty happy, really.
Okay, that's the sort of thing you like to hear. Okay, coming up to the end now. So very quickly, Jim, why do you find customers typically move Oracle to the cloud? And once they're there, what benefits do they get?
Okay, so as we said right at the start, the drivers for migration that we see are business critical events. So it might be the end of a data center lease, it might be the renegotiation of a support arrangement, or it might be a strategic cloud first or all in cloud policy. And that's typically where we see the Oracle systems being scooped up into a larger program and planned into a cloud adoption program over a number of months or years. And of course we achieve that. So we migrate them to the cloud, and that primary business benefit is achieved. But I think the interesting ones are what the customer finds afterwards. And what Ross mentioned and the other customer I spoke about is lots of people experience a performance uptick. So simply the capability of the platform, whether you're running EC2 or RDS, what we hear from our customers is that the workloads run faster on equivalent or smaller infrastructure footprints. So that means happier users, quicker transactions, things that we do, like quicker month end, quicker close processes and things like that. So that's a benefit that we hear about straight away. And after that, I think modernization as well. We see customers who are using very legacy on-premise infrastructure techniques. So I'm thinking of FTP boxes and drop boxes and point-to-point integrations when you move to cloud, you might not do a complete refactor, a complete transformation, but the opportunity to unpick some of these legacy integrations, old school architecture techniques, is really simple. So moving file systems to S3, simple things like that can really have a transformational effect, simply because they lower the complexity of the platform, make it lower cost to support, and make it simpler in the long run as well. And I think those would be the three. Mike, what about you? What do you see?
Yeah, there's some key benefits that we see. We've probably covered most of them, but I'll just quickly go over them again. So elasticity, and especially in the non-production space, production workloads tend to be fairly static, at least you hope, with the exception of things like Black Friday, which I'll come on to in a minute. But elasticity in your dev, your test, and what I mean by that is the ability to spin things down. So it's very common that we'll see, as part of a business plan or the business justification, is that actually my developers work 9 to 5. So why should the hardware upon which they're running run 24/7? If they're only working 8 hours a day, surely my hardware should only work 8 hours a day, and that in itself gives quite significant benefits. And again, through the automation that we have, we actually see a lot of our customers are writing automation scripts that can detect when things aren't being used and just spin them down, so that they're saving massive costs there. Scalability is another huge advantage, and I'll come back to the Black Friday example. Black Friday is coming up. For certainly most of the e-commerce vendors, we're going to expect to see a big spike in transactions during that period. So your challenge then is, how do I deal with the spike? On-premise, you've got to buy some hardware that can cope with the spike all year round, 365 days of the year, and Black Friday is, I was going to say it occurs for a day, but this year it appears to be occurring for a week. But nonetheless, it appears for a short period of time. Yeah. So elasticity, the scalability gives me the ability to scale up my workloads for these types of events and then scale it back down again afterwards, so I can right-size my environments. Agility is another key one, and I've already touched on that a bit with the elasticity elements of it. I can write scripts that can sit in the background and automate the deployment of stuff. These are cloud features. We're doing some work for another government department where they are deploying an incredibly complex architecture, which has got single sign-on and identity management, and it's a very complex environment that previously used to take them in the region of 6 to 8 weeks just to build. And this is fully scripted and tested. That's about as good as they could get it in a physical environment. We have got that down to under 2 days through the automation. So the agility aspects are not to be underestimated that the cloud is bringing. And when you look at the patterns and you couple that with your scaling and your elasticity, this automation is what facilitates the ability to scale up and down and build, deploy and remove environments very, very rapidly to achieve the full benefits. And cost, let's not forget, whilst we are spinning all these things down and only using them when we need them and when we right size them, so things are running at 80% utilization instead of 20% utilization, these give significant cost benefits. And as Jim said at the beginning, the triggers tend to be commercial events. My data center is coming up for renewal. I've got a support contract coming up for renewal. But there's always a trigger, and the trigger is invariably some sort of a commercial trigger. So cost becomes, it tends to be what people start looking at cloud for, but it rarely becomes the reason they go cloud. The reason they go cloud is elasticity, agility, availability, all those types of things are why they get there. So that's typically what we're seeing. But yeah, Ross, what was the cloud strategy? What drove you to the cloud strategy at Belron?
I really couldn't expand on what you guys have already said. I mean, to be honest, just outside of Oracle, we're doing software delivery. So our speed and agility and being able to, roll stuff out, not, over-egg our environments, simplify what we have, take advantage of the flexibility, the risk mitigation as well from, I guess, the high availability that generally the cloud offers, the powering down of environments, etc., to save cost, all that stuff, and that's automated. That we've added those things, and these are things that we're doing now, and it's looking forward to the improved I guess feature sets that the cloud now provides, that we can start looking at how do we improve the digital transformation of our company. Is another reason, and to your point, cost is a factor in there to a degree, but I guess all the other benefits that you get with the cloud, a cloud first strategy, for example, or cloud hosting, is something that's very much driving our way forward in that space.
Thanks, Ross. So moving on. So with business agility and the aim to move costs and the ability to kind of disentangle your environment better once it's moved up into the cloud, one of the questions that come up a lot is, what can we do with these legacy applications and databases? And is it feasible to move across to open source? Having said that, Jim, could you give us a short overview of the customers we see moving across and
Sure.
and what they're hoping to get from that?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, we see, I've said a number of times, 2 years ago, it was important to be able to talk about open source transformation. Now it's actually happening. We've got numerous projects up and running within Clockwork where customers are migrating to these open source platforms, mostly to Postgres, also to MySQL as well, and looking at the Aurora options therein as well. Customers want to reduce licenses, they want more flexibility in how they treat those workloads, and they want to lower costs. That's what it is, and putting some competitive tension back in the database world is what's going to happen as a result of all of it. I mean, Mike, you must see even more, how realistic is it for customers to move these workloads?
The programs are in place to make it possible. I'm not going to say that 100% of your workloads can move to cloud tomorrow, because that's not realistic. But what I can say is that a large percentage of your workloads certainly can. We have the program, our Database Freedom Program, which I mentioned earlier, and through that we have various assessments that we do, workshops that we run, pilots and proof of concepts that we run with through our partners like Clockwork, with our customers, to help work out the feasibility of a move and also a timeline for a move. I've mentioned Verizon, who started with a proof of concept and are now going all in. I probably ought to mention what we're doing ourselves. So internally, we have a project called Rolling Stone. Our CEO, Andy Jassy, has been tweeting about it quite a lot recently. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but we have recently moved our data warehouse off of Oracle, and that is running wholly and solely in our own open source databases now. Reading the tweets, there's some debate as to whether or not it's the world's biggest data warehouse, but it's certainly up there if it isn't. And that is now not only running on our open source databases, but running faster and with less problems on our open source databases than what it was previously. So we're doing it ourselves. Project Rolling Stone is about AWS, or Amazon actually. It's about Amazon.com moving away from commercial databases towards the open source databases that we promote as a company. The last tweet that I saw from Andy Jassy said that by the end of this year, I think it was, 88% of our Oracle databases will have migrated to open source. We're almost there. I do know what the target end date is. I'm pretty certain I'm not allowed to tell you what it is, but we have a target to have no Oracle databases within our estate. So we're doing it to ourselves. Companies like Verizon are doing it. And just give you a flavor of what we'll do as part of the Database Freedom, the workshop assessments. We have things which we call our workload qualification framework. We categorize 1 through 5, 1 being really easy to do, so complete no-brainer, virtually 100% automatic conversion, through to 5 being not something that's going to move. The best example of 5, by the way, is eBusiness, Oracle eBusiness Suite. That is never going to run on anything other than Oracle. And in fact, because of what Oracle forced you to do to run eBusiness Suite, we can't even run it in RDS for Oracle. But we can still run it in EC2, and we have hundreds of customers doing that. But as part of our workload qualification, we say that categories 1 are straight, virtually no change at all. Categories 2 are relatively straightforward with minor changes. And what we see across all the customers we've looked at, 10 to 20% of workloads fall into category 1. 20 to 30% of workloads fall into category 2. So across the average customer's Oracle database estate, up to 50% of their databases are relatively straightforward and easy to move straight to open source. So half of your databases could go to open source with very little business impact and very little refactoring required. And it's something like 70 or 80% or even more of your databases can go to open source just with a little bit more work. So what we do through Database Freedom is work with our customers, through our partners, to put these credible plans together to give them a roadmap to get from on-premise commercial to cloud native.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. We've got just a couple minutes, so I think maybe we can just keep it short and sharp and do a couple of attendee questions as well. Jim, what's the best way to get started if you're looking at this from a cold start?
The best way to get started is to get started. I always echo the Amazon approach to cloud migration. That's picking a workload and starting to experiment. The beauty of the platform is that you can do that in a non-committed way, so you can start to migrate things and get things going. At the risk of being too pitchy, Clockwork do a readiness assessment specifically for Oracle systems, where we look at Oracle estates, suitable architectures for migration, and we also take into account the license and cost implications as well. So that's a great place to start. But I would say reach out to AWS, reach out to us, and get started with a meaningful representative workload.
Sounds good. Mike, can you do the opposite for me? Can you tell me where not to start?
Yeah, where not to. Well, everybody you should at least look at it. So I would say some things aren't suitable for, well, not everything's suitable for cloud. Some things aren't suitable for open source. I'm yet to come across a workload that's not suitable for cloud, unless you're married to the mainframe. I'm not aware of a mainframe cloud solution, but if you're not on a mainframe, I can't think of anything that isn't suitable for some form of cloud, because we've got our EC2 offerings for things like eBusiness Suite, which we can't take to open source or even to our database services. So, yeah, most things will go there. It's about being realistic on what your outcomes are. And there's actually a quote from Andy Jassy I'd like to throw in. It's back to basically what Jim was saying. But what Andy Jassy says, if you've worked out more than 70% of what you do, what you plan to do, you've been thinking about it too much. Just get in there and do it, and work it out as you go. It's the benefit of cloud. It's, fail quickly, throw it away, start again. That's what cloud brings.
Thank you. That's really good advice, guys. So next one is audience questions. Jim, what's the first there, please?
The first one I've seen is a question that we run into quite frequently, and I'm going to throw it to Mike because I'm sure you've seen loads of it. Should a customer run an Oracle workload in EC2 or in RDS?
Yeah, it is a question I see a lot, and actually it's a large part about what our assessments are for, is where should the workload go? At the end of the day, the higher up the stack you can get, the better the benefit you will achieve. So cloud native is your maximum cloud benefit. A managed service, so our RDS services are a good benefit, but you're still tied to the commercial environments, and EC2 being the lowest benefit. Now, as I've already mentioned a few times, something like Oracle eBusiness Suite can never go RDS because of the tie-ins back to the commercial vendor. So it's really important to do a credible assessment and work out your viability. But as a rule of thumb, if you own the software, you should be able to go to RDS, a managed service. If you're dependent upon a vendor for the software, or you don't own it, then you are beholden upon the vendor as to where you go, and you tend to end up on EC2. But we do have other programs to work with our vendors to help them move to cloud native, which I don't have time to go into today. So that's not a showstopper. It just means there's a different way of tackling it.
Okay, and thank you very much, Mike. And we have another one as well. A customer with a 5 terabyte live system moving to RDS. What are the options for migration? It looks like it needs a very low downtime. what are the options for migration?
Okay, so 5 petabyte system, low downtime. You're not the first to do that. I'm sure you won't be the last.
Smaller terabytes.
Oh, 5 terabytes, not petabytes. Good. Petabytes brings us into the snowmobiles, but anyway, terabytes. Yeah, so 5 terabytes, low downtime. We've got a couple of options. If you're going to EC2, then all of the vendor native tools apply. If you're coming to RDS, which we certainly hope you are, or even if you're going to open source, we can use products like our database migration service, our DMS service, that does cross-platform migrations, and it does data synchronization. So a recommended approach for 5 terabytes, which is over the size of what we'd recommend a data shipping is done, simply because of bandwidth requirements, we'd look at doing something like our Snowball service. And this is where we ship a device into your data center. You use our tools to populate that device. You ship the device back to us, back to our data centers. We will load it up into your systems. And then the synchronization tools that help load the device in the first place will then do the synchronization and catch up. At a point in time in the future when the cloud environments and the on-premise environments are now in sync, you can then switch over with 5-10 minutes. Basically, what you're waiting for is you've got to shut the system down, wait for the last transaction to flush, and that depends on the load on your system, and then you can start the new systems up. So we can certainly do very low outage windows, even with 5 terabyte databases.
Thank you very much, Mike. So I think we've just run out of time. I think we've done really well. My contact information is up on the screen, and we'll be sending out an email with recording of the webinar within the next hour or so. So if you have any further questions, please, by all means, get in touch with me. My number's there, my email's there, and I respond fairly quickly. So I think with that, let's close this off and just say thank you to all of the panelists and for your attention. All right, thank you.